Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Today is June 5th. It is a Wednesday, just as all of our live episodes are here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. As we let some folks trickle in, I'm going to check one thing here with the tweet that I put out. Let's see if this is rolling here. All right, bear with me for just 1 second. I tried something new as usual that did not go well for me. So we're going to update the tweet here. Let's get back to here. Share, copy. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get better at embedding the tweets into Twitter. I still don't think I'm actually doing it right, but we're learning. We are learning as we go. So anyway, again, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Plenty to talk about as the college basketball offseason, which is not really so much of an offseason anymore, continues to roll on. But first, please make sure you are subscribed to us here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, where we host these episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, you can find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on podcast, on Spotify, or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes. Those are out every Monday and Friday. And then also, please make sure you are following me on Twitter as well. That is at BRamseyKSR. So with the housekeeping out of the way, let's dive right into today's discussion. And that is looking at some of the preseason rankings. I'm using the Rothstein 45 just because, honestly, it came out yesterday. I really like John Rothstein. I think he does as good of a job as anybody covering the national landscape of college basketball. So we're going to use his preseason top 45, related to the top 25, and then compare it to the Bart Torvik preseason projections for, obviously, for 2025, for 2024, 2025. And namely, I want to look at some of the discrepancies between, obviously, what somebody, it's just a personal opinion of John Rothstein, what he is projecting to be the top 25 teams in college basketball, and then what a analytically based view of the data spits out for a preseason top 25. And there were 10 different instances where there was a 10 spot difference between what Rothstein had and what Torvik had. And I found that interesting. So I want to look at those 10 kind of major discrepancies and just, kind of give some of my thoughts, kind of maybe which way which side of the fence I'm more aligned on, and go from there. And we get started right off the bat. And obviously, it's still only June 5th. So there are, there's still some things to shake out. There's still, unsigned 2024 recruits. There's still a million people in the portal that still need to find homes. But I think it's pretty fair to say that at least among the consensus teams at the top of the rankings, Alabama is certainly one of them. In John Rothstein's list, he had Alabama number one. I would have Alabama number one if I were to put one out today as well. But it was interesting because Bart Torvik, again, an analytically based website, only projects them at number 10. So right off the bat, we have a relatively sizable difference here. Now, as we go through this, I think you'll start to see that probably some of the defensive projections of Torvik are what pull down some of these teams, whether that, turns out to be smart or wrong. I guess we'll kind of see that play out over the course of the season. But for example, he projects Alabama only 47th defensively. And I think that makes it in his models very hard to be ranked towards the top when you obviously are, he's projecting you to not be great on the defensive end of the floor. However, I just think that the talent of this Alabama team is going to be really hard to bet against this season. You have obviously Mark Sears coming back as somebody who's going to be probably a preseason National Player of the Year candidate, but certainly a preseason first team All-American type of player. You get the transfer Aiden Holloway to give from Auburn even more backcourt explosiveness and dynamic playmaking. Latrell Wrightsell gives you some shooting. You bring back Grant Nelson, Clifford Amori. You get the transfer from Rutgers, one of the best transfers in college basketball this season, to hold things down at the 5. I love their incoming freshman class, Darion Reed, Aiden Sherrill. These guys, Jaron Stevenson, LeBaron Philon, the former Kansas signee as well. There's a lot of depth, a lot of pieces. You have playmaking in the backcourt. You have shooting on the wings. You have size and athleticism in your front court. And I think especially with Amori around the basket and with what Grant Nelson can do with some rim protection as well, I think you're going to see this team be quite a bit better defensively than they were even last year. And obviously that still got them to a Final Four. But, to me, the projection that Bart Torvik has them at 10th, I have a hard time imagining, again, reasonable minds can disagree and can have Alabama and a lot of these teams that we're going to talk about, in a 4, 5, 6 team range. I don't know if you can really make an argument that Alabama isn't a top 5 team going into this season. The other team that Rothstein had in the top 5 that Torvik was much, much lower on, that is the Baylor Bears. Rothstein had them at number 4. Torvik had them down at number 21. And again, I think we see the defensive side of the ball come into effect here. Torvik has them 83rd defensively, but 4th offensively. Again, I think that makes it hard in these more analytically based kind of formulaic projections. It makes it hard to be a top 5, top 10 team when you're pulled down or weighted down so much via one side of the ball. And I think that's what we see with this Baylor team. Again, when you just look at the roster on paper, and I think that's why a human ranks them higher than the computers. Jeremy Roach, veteran point guard from Duke, coming in to run the show. You bring back Jaden Nunn. You have VJ Edgecombe, one of the best freshmen coming into college basketball this season, who will start as well. Langston Love. This is a team that can start 4 guards and be really athletic and really explosive in the backcourt, which has kind of been a staple of these last few years of Coach Scott Drew's teams there at Baylor. And then you have, to me, a perfect 5-man for this sort of a system, a more offensive-minded guy that this team's going to be able to score. He's a little undersized, but Norchard Omier from Miami. He's going to be really good in the system. I love Rob Wright, one of my favorite freshman guards in this class of 2024. I think he'll be really good to add some more firepower off the bench. To me, going into this season, as good of a backcourt as anybody has in the country, they're going to put up a ton of points. Yes, there are some question marks to cover on the defensive end of the floor, but again, Rothstein has them at 4. The computers, Torvik has them at 21. I lean more towards Rothstein on this one. Probably, maybe it wouldn't be in my top 5, but certainly in top 10. I think depth's a little bit of an issue, especially in the front court for this team. But when you consider what they're going to be able to do on the perimeter, they're going to be really, really tough to beat. Now, the one that I teased for some clickbait opportunities today, and that is the Arkansas Razorbacks, the next team to talk about. And oddly enough, the biggest discrepancy between the Rothstein 45 and the Bart Torvik projections. And I find this really interesting. And I know, you can see the UK stuff behind me. This entire season is going to be marred by the difficulty that Arkansas media and fans and Kentucky media and fans have discussing one another without it just turning into hatred and vitriol. I like to think that I don't delve into that side of things. I'm not somebody I defended Coach Cal pretty much up to the very end. I don't love him now, but I loved everything that Coach Cal brought to Lexington. I don't hate anything about Arkansas. I hope we can have this conversation without having to say that time and time again. But I do find it interesting because I think this Arkansas roster is a little overrated at this time. I just said on Twitter yesterday at Ramsey KSR how talented I think they are. They got some of the best transfers in the portal with John L. Davis, Jonas Adu, guys that I really, really like. And then you add in the Kentucky guys, DJ Wagner, Zavonimir Ivisic, obviously bringing over some of the freshmen. Really like Carter Knox. Really like Boogie Fland. I think Billy Richmond will give them a defensive punch on the wing as well. But Where does the shooting come from? Again, I think this is the difference between Coach Cal and what Kentucky's about now, where Coach Cal's strength is talent accumulation. He has accumulated 9 very talented scholarship players at Kentucky, especially with getting Trevon Brazile to come back to Arkansas. But how do they fit together? I don't know how well these pieces fit together because the spacing is going to be hard to come by. You're really relying on John L. Davis to be your primary shooter, which he proved that he could be last season. It was his first year really stepping up the three-point volume, made over 2 threes a game last year at an excellent percentage. He's a great shooter, no questions there. I think Boogie Fland and Carter Knox can make threes as freshmen. But generally speaking, freshmen are probably not going to be as efficient as some of the other guys. And then to me, it is just question marks with everybody else as it pertains to their three-point shooting. So John Rothstein has them all the way up at number 9 in his preseason top 25. Bart Torvik, with the addition of Trevon Brazile, has them at 45th. So you have 9 versus 45 in the computers. That is as drastic of a difference as I saw in any of these rankings. I don't think they're only the 45th best team in college basketball going into the year. There's too much talent. Coach Cal has proven to win too many basketball games, even lately. I know it hasn't necessarily translated to March success, but he's going to win basketball games. But I also don't think that they're the 9th best team. I think they are a top 25 team, but I certainly don't think they're a top 10 team. And I think that I probably side more with the computers on this one, just because to me, there are still some glaring issues with this roster. And it can be easy, especially because we're all accustomed to the preseason hype of a Coach Calipari team. We are accustomed to it being supremely talented, and we are accustomed to going into the year being like, man, like I think this is the group that's going to get it done, because now you have some veteran guys. Like he has a John L. Davis, he has a Jonas Adu, who are proven at the highest levels of college basketball, to add in with guys with some experience playing for him, like Adu Thiero, DJ Wagner, these sort of guys. And then you have a normal influx of freshman talent. So there's a lot to like about this roster, but I do think that there are serious questions that a lot of the national media just seem to be glossing over. And especially when you see how the last few years have gone, I know it's a new home, but he's kind of running it back the same way. So I still have my questions about how it's going to work out this year. And that stark difference between 9 and 45 was kind of the impetus of wanting to do this style of show today. A couple comments from Travis here before we move on. It's funny because it'll probably turn out that they are either a top 10, 15 team or 35 to 40. It says that we either just click or not at all. You're probably right. Yeah, like it is one of those things where, you know, that middle ground might not be where they live. It might be like one of these two one of these two opinions being what it turns out to be. Either they're going to be really, really darn good in a top 10 type team like Rothstein has them, or the computers like Bart Torvik right now that has them 45th are going to be right where it's like, man, this team's never really found their flow. They finished 20 and 12. They're a 7 seed and losing the first round or whatever. Another SEC team with a stark contrast between the human preseason polls and the computers, Texas A&M. Rothstein had them at 13. Torvik had them at 26th. People that know me know I'm not a big Buzz Williams guy. I'm not a big fan of Wade Taylor and everything that he does in the backcourt there at Texas A&M. It is feast or famine if there ever has been feast or famine. There are games where Texas A&M last season was utterly unbeatable. As a Kentucky fan, trust me, I saw it firsthand. But then there are other games where like you could roll out a good Division II team with a scouting report and a plan, and they would beat them because you're just going to let Wade Taylor go 4 for 27 and shoot them out of the game. So I think that, and when you look at the projections here, Torvik has them pretty highly rated. They're 35th defensively. Again, I think that helps them a little bit. Like I don't even think I would have them in my top 25 if the season started today. But there is a lot to like that. They bring a lot back from a good team. I mean, again, Wade Taylor, as good of a returning guard as there is in the country. You have Manny Obaseki, you have Solomon Washington, Henry Coleman, Anderson Garcia, one of the best rebounders in the SEC. So there's a lot to bring back here. Hayden Hefner back as well. So there's a lot of returning pieces. Again, I just don't think those pieces are excellent. So I probably move more towards the computers on that one. Travis adds, I would be interested in what last year preseason predictions were for those two and what was most accurate. I might be, I'm not going to be able to do it on this show, but I might be able to pull that information. I don't know if I can do the projections side on the computer, but I'll look into it and I'll just text you the results, I guess. Sticking in the SEC, it's interesting that there's been some pretty big discrepancies in the SEC, and so far the computers have been lower on SEC teams, so that's going to change in a little bit with the team that we're going to talk about. But Florida Gators, Rothstein had them 18. Bart Torvik had them at number 33. I really like this Florida team. Walter Clayton Jr., one of my favorite players in college basketball going into this season. They bring back Will Richard. They bring back Alex Condon, a forward who I'm high on, and I think will continue to develop into a real threat for them. They get Elijah Martin, the Florida Atlantic transfer. They add in Ruben Chinui from Washington State, who will probably be their 5-man this year, moving on from Colin Castleton. I like Todd Golden and his staff. I think they do a good job. It's funny how he's so analytically based as a coach, but then the analytic projections aren't as high on them. Over at Bart Torvik, again, 18 to 33 is the spread there. I think this Florida team is a top 20 team in the country. They have a lot of talent. Again, when you have an All-American caliber guard, which I really think Walter Clayton Jr. is, that just makes me think that your floor is pretty high for what you're going to be able to accomplish in the season, especially adding in a guy like Elijah Martin, who's so proven from Florida Atlantic, like what the backcourt is going to be able to do there in Gainesville. Moving on, another one here, the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Ross team has them at 19, which I just don't really understand. The computers have them at 46. 36, sorry. 36. Yeah, they got hot towards the end of that, but like to me, this is the classic example of we had 25 or so games of sample size. Ohio State just wasn't very good for those 25 games. Chris Holtmann gets fired. Jake Diedler kind of injects some excitement into the program to the point where they have to hire him as the basketball coach. And I like Diedler. I personally know a couple of their assistants on staff, and heck, I was just talking to one yesterday. And I want it to work out for them. I just look at their roster, and I mean, getting Michi Johnson back, I mean, he was very good at South Carolina last year. Bruce Thornton, good guard in the Big Ten. But then you're putting a lot of stock in some unproven guys, Sean Stewart from Duke and Aaron Bradshaw from Kentucky, putting a lot of stock in those guys making the leaps that we kind of expected them to make, coming into their freshman years. We're expecting those guys to be ready now in year 2 to carry your front court. And man, I just don't know if that is going to happen for them, but we'll see how it goes. This is one where I probably do lean more towards the computer projections. Again, Ohio State at 19 in the Rothstein 45, number 36 in the projections. What connection got Bradshaw there? Really no real projection or connection that I know of. I would call it NIL money and then probably some clutch agency stuff. A lot of things surrounding Aaron Bradshaw are very agency related. That they kind of control what he does on a basketball court pretty heavily. I almost feel like I'm talking about the mafia. I'm like scared to go into it too much. But no, I think that those decisions were kind of made for him in terms of where he was going to go. I think honestly it was finding a place where he was going to have a lot of opportunities without a whole lot of competition in the front court, where he was probably promised 25 minutes a game and promised, way more than you and I would expect for NIL, and that probably got him to Columbus. Sticking in the great state of Ohio, Rothstein has Cincinnati up at 21, which is as high as I've seen anybody have Cincinnati. The computers have them down at number 43. I do like some of what they did in the offseason. I like, excuse me, I love the addition of Connor Hickman, the Bradley transfer. You get Dylan Mitchell from Texas, another guy that I really like. There's a Butler, former Butler transfer in there as well. Besides Lucasias guy. You have Jizzle James, you have Day Thomas, a couple really good players in the backcourt as well. CJ Frederick might be healthy this season as well. That's a big might. But there are some things to work with. I think this team can be good. Do I think they're top 25? With the amount of other talent in college basketball, I have a hard time getting myself to a top 25 projection on Cincinnati. Again, computers had them at 43, probably lean more that way. Now to kind of flip things around, it feels like several of these have been computers being lower on a team, Rothstein being higher on a team. These next two are going to be the opposite. Teams that in the Rothstein 45 are ranked much lower, but the computers really, really like. First and foremost, we're talking about the Tennessee Volunteers. Got a projected starting five here, and this is pretty darn good. Zakai Ziegler, obviously a proven returning guard in the SEC, one of the better two-way point guards in the country. Jermaine Mashack, elite athlete, physical tools, everything you would want athletically and physically. Chaz Lanier, the transfer from North Florida, one of the best scorers and shooters in college basketball last season. Igor Misilic, transfer from Charlotte, really good, high potential front court piece there. And then Felix Okpara, another guy I like for Ohio State transfer. We just talked about the Buckeyes. But I think that to me, the backcourt here, really, really good, especially when you consider Jordan Gainey, some of the other options off at the bench. But I think you're going to see like JP Estrella step up in the front court as well for some added depth behind Okpara. We always can expect these Rick Barnes, Tennessee teams to be really good on the defensive end of the floor. Now, does Lanier do enough to kind of fill in those shoes left by obviously Dalton Connect, Santiago Vescovi, some of these other talented veteran guys that Tennessee had last year that made them so successful? Does Lanier making that step in just 1 year from North Florida to the SEC in Tennessee, does he have enough firepower to really help carry them, especially when Zakai Ziegler, your point guard, isn't necessarily like a high-level scoring threat. He's a great playmaker, great defender, but he's not going to bring you a ton of firepower and scoring punch. I do worry a little bit about what this team is going to be on the offensive end of the floor. But we talked about it earlier. Like the computer projections were lower on some of these teams because of factoring in defense. Well, they're number 2 projected preseason in defense by Bart Torvik. That helps shift them up despite only being 64th offensively, echoing some of my concerns. So to me, I think Tennessee is maybe only the 3rd or 4th best team on paper in the SEC going into this year. So I probably lean more towards where Rothstein has them around 22 than I do at number 7 where Bart Torvik has them. Why did Jonas Adu want to leave Tennessee? I don't know. I have no intricate knowledge of this. There were definitely some off-the-court things with Jonas Adu in Knoxville. I think him and Rick Barnes just butted heads pretty heavily at times. And, I mean, you follow it enough, Trav, to know at this point, like, sometimes leaving is just what you do. And it's unfortunate that we've gotten to that point, but especially with NIL, I mean, I've talked about this with some different people. Like, I don't know if there's a single industry in the country right now. Like, what you could be a fast food worker, you could work at UPS, you could work at more than a bakery in Lexington, in Versailles, Kentucky. You could work anywhere. And I'm not sure that there is a industry where you are more overvalued for what you actually bring to the table than if you are a quality college basketball transfer. Like, you know, if you deserve to make $60,000 a year, most people make around $60,000 a year. In college basketball, just by nature of working or just by nature of being in the transfer portal, it's like you all of a sudden are worth $100,000, whether you brought much to the table last year or not. So I think that a guy like Jonas Sadu, he was really good. He was a borderline SEC player last season, but there's nothing like he's a replaceable sort of guy. That there are a lot of Jonas Adus in college basketball, at least in my opinion, but he's going to command, $250,000 plus because he's a veteran, because he's proven, because he can block shots. So you just go in the portal and move along. The other team that the computers are really high on, and that would be Creighton. They have them at number 6. Number 6, Rothstein had them at 23. Computers have them 5th in offense, 13th in defense. Now they bring back Stephen Ashworth. They got the Texas Tech transfer, Pop Isaacs. I really like that. They bring back Mason Miller. They bring back Ryan Kalkbrenner for what seems to be his 100th year of college basketball. Obviously, that gives them a high level of rim protection and, probably one of the best two-way centers in college basketball going into this season. I think Stephen Ashworth is right for a breakout in the backcourt as well, and put in with Pop Isaacs. I really like that. Obviously, you lose some things here, Trey Alexander out the door, etc. But and then Baylor Shireman as well. So there's plenty to make up. But I mean, Coach McDermott has done a great job, especially offensively, with this group time and time again. No real concerns about what they're going to be offensively. Then when Kalkbrenner is your 5-man, your ceiling or your floor is pretty high on the defensive side of the ball. I think Creighton has a chance to be a top 15 team this season. I'm really high on them, so I probably lean more towards the computer projections. Last but not least, the 10th team that had a 10-plus spot discrepancy between the Rothstein 45 and the Bart Torvik projections, Oregon. Rothstein had them just inside the top 25 at 24. Computers had them down at 47. Now, last year, it's hard to really delve much into what the Ducks dealt with last year because there were just so many injuries that derailed much of their season. But I'm not going to be able to sit here and act like I have this depth of knowledge of what Oregon is going to be this season, so I'm not even going to try to render an opinion there. I do like TJ Bamba, the Villanova transfer. I think he's going to be a really good player for them. Kwame Evans coming back. I think he is a high upside sort of guy in the front court for them. So I do think that the Ducks have some potential, but we just need to see it on the court because we haven't seen a lot of these pieces together for Coach Dana Altman. Lastly, I do just want to mention it was interesting. We talked about how it kind of worked out just for the sake of the show that Arkansas was the biggest discrepancy. So, that just wets the whistle of a lot of folks online anytime you talk about Arkansas. But Kentucky actually had the exact same ranking. They were the only one I could find. Rothstein had them number 29. The computers had them at number 29. Found that interesting. I would have them a little higher than that. Admittedly, yes, if there's anybody who's going to value the Kentucky transfers more than they should, hand up, yeah, it's probably me. But I do just, to me, we're in the area of the transfer portal, we have to delve with unknowns a lot. Like a lot of these teams, it's unknown. We haven't seen these pieces together, or you're relying heavily on guys that are making jumps from lower mid-major basketball to high major Power 5 basketball. So, yes, Kentucky has more turnover than almost everybody in the country because it's almost an infinite amount, or it is an infinite amount of turnover. There's nobody from last year's team. Only Jackson Robinson even played for Mark Pope last season. But why are they why is Kentucky the program that we worry about how it all fits together at such a higher level than what we worry about some of these other programs? So to me, they're a top 20 team going into the season. I know that being 29th isn't exactly super far off of that, but I am going to be higher on Kentucky than both what Rothstein and Bart Torvik currently say. Now, hopefully that was interesting today, diving into some of those discrepancies. I certainly found it interesting when I was just looking at them. It's actually a poster on KS Board this morning had posted something about the Bart Torvik projections. It was my first time looking at them this offseason, so I kind of ran them against, again, the Rothstein 45 and found some of the big discrepancies. Interesting. Thanks, Trav. Glad you enjoyed it. But hopefully everybody else enjoyed it as well. Again, we have these episodes every Wednesday here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. So make sure you tune in every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time for All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Just subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on podcast. We'll be back this Friday with an episode in the morning, so stay tuned for that. And then also to catch all of my work, whether it be the YouTube show, the podcast, any written work on KSR, all that good stuff lives on my Twitter account at BRamseyKSR. So give me a follow there as well. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and thanks for listening.